On July 20, 1942, the morning in the South Pacific was suffocatingly humid. On Espiritu Santo Island, an extraordinary event was unfolding where just 20 days earlier stood the dense virgin jungle. American bulldozers were now completing a 6,000-foot airstrip. With only 6 tractors, 2 scrapers, and 387 men, the 3rd Construction Battalion Detachment of the US Navy Seabees had achieved what Japanese military doctrine deemed impossible without months of labor from thousands of workers. No contemporary Japanese observer documented this feat, but intelligence reports would later confirm it. Captured documents and post-war interrogations reveal that Japanese strategists grossly underestimated American construction capabilities. Their pre-war assessments, recorded in ADS translated documents, projected that U.S. forces would need at least 12 months to launch offensive operations after securing territory. Reality proved otherwise, shattering their assumptions. The narrative of how the Japanese encountered Seabees is not captured through eloquent diaries or detailed memoirs, most of which were destroyed. Instead, it is pieced together from American construction records and Japanese strategic decisions that show increasing awareness of this capability. Limited surviving sources also contribute to understanding the magnitude of the impact on Japanese military planning. The story is best recounted through factual data, statistics, and the stark strategic consequences that compelled Japanese commanders to confront an industrial and engineering prowess far exceeding their expectations. The first large-scale encounter with American construction capabilities occurred during the Guadalcanal campaign. When U.S. Marines landed on August 7, 1942, they seized a nearly complete Japanese airfield at Lunga Point. This field had been built by 2774 workers over more than a month. 1,379 Japanese, 1,145 Koreans, and 250 local civilians. In contrast, the Americans made it operational within just 6 days. The 6th Naval Construction Battalion, the first Seabees to see combat, arrived on September 1, 1942, with 387 men and 5 officers. From then on, they began expanding and improving Henderson Field despite daily enemy bombardment, setting a pattern that would repeat across the Pacific. Official records detail how these Seabees immediately set about enhancing the airfield under constant threat of attack. Japanese forces stationed in Rabaul initiated daily midday bombing raids, using Mitsubishi Jima 4 million Betty bombers. On the night of October 13 to 14, 1942, Japanese battleships Kongo and Haruna launched over 914-inch shells at the airfield, resulting in 53 craters on the runway. By morning on October 15, the runway was operational once again. This military response highlights the growing recognition of American construction capabilities among the Japanese. Admiral Yamamoto redirected the combined fleet's primary objective from supporting ground operations to destroying Henderson Field due to its strategic importance. The Tokyo Express high-speed destroyer runs, capable of transporting only limited supplies and hindering heavy equipment transport, were a direct reaction to Henderson Field's threat against slower supply vessels. This significant change in Japanese logistics, compelled by a single airfield that could be quickly constructed and maintained, would ultimately contribute to the starvation and eventual defeat of Japanese forces on Guadalcanal. Colonel Keanu Ikiki led the first major Japanese counterattack against Henderson Field with a 917-man detachment, confident he could retake it. However, his force was annihilated at the Battle of Tenaru on August 21, 1942. Although Ikiki's personal papers were destroyed, captured operational orders revealed that his unit had no appreciation for American construction capabilities. The Japanese anticipated encountering a partially complete airfield with minimal defenses, but instead faced a fully operational base housing 31 Marine aircraft. Lieutenant General Harukichi Taki, commanding the Japanese 17th Army, attempted to recapture Henderson Field 3 times between August and November 1942. Each assault was based on the assumption that the field would take weeks to repair once damaged. Following the intense October naval bombardment, Taki's staff estimated the airfield would be non-operational for at least a week. However, its rapid restoration forced a reassessment of American capabilities that reverberated through Japanese strategic planning. As American forces advanced into the Central Pacific in 1943, the disparity in construction speed became increasingly evident to Japanese defenders. The Gilbert Islands campaign exemplified this stark contrast most dramatically. During the November 20-23 assault on Tarawa, the 74th Naval Construction Battalion joined Marine troops. The approximately 5,000-strong Japanese garrison from the 3rd and 7th Special Naval Landing Forces had spent months fortifying Betio Island. They had built a 45 zero-foot airstrip mainly through manual labor over several months. The Seabees managed to make the battle-damaged airfield operational within just 15 hours, an achievement well documented in official Naval Construction Battalion reports rather than being mere speculation or propaganda. Although there were no diary entries from Japanese defenders who witnessed this accomplishment, most perished during the final Banzai charge. The strategic impact was immediately clear to Japanese high command. Later intelligence captured revealed that Japanese staff officers had calculated American forces could gain air superiority over newly captured territories within days instead of weeks or months. The operations in the Marshall Islands early in 1944 further underscored this new reality. At Quadriline, the 121st Construction Battalion swiftly transformed captured Japanese facilities into a major aviation base, even as combat was still ongoing. Perhaps more impressively, the 110th Naval Construction Battalion converted a damaged runway into a 68 zero-foot bomber strip, capable of supporting B-24 operations against Japanese strongholds like Truk. Japanese intelligence had severely underestimated American construction capabilities. Pre-war estimates by Japan predicted that U.S. merchant shipping production for 1943 would be around 5 million tons. The actual output was nearly 4 times higher at 19.2 million tons. Furthermore, they estimated the U.S. Navy's strength in December 1943 to be 13,070 officers and 296,000 enlisted men, whereas the real figures were closer to 219,000, 279 officers, 120,472 officer candidates, and 2,034,343 enlisted personnel, more than 7 times their projections. This intelligence failure was most pronounced in construction capabilities. Japanese military doctrine anticipated months for significant airfield projects, with construction units like the 17th Setsusai Tai, equipped primarily with basic hand tools such as 900 shovels and limited rollers. They had no idea that American aviation engineer battalions would deploy with over 200 pieces of heavy equipment and more than 140 vehicles each. The disparity in construction capabilities became starkly evident during the Marianas Campaign, which showcased these islands' potential as strategic bases for B-29 bombers targeting Japan itself. Lieutenant General Yoshitsugu Saito, who commanded the Japanese 43rd Division on Saipan, observed American engineering capabilities that surpassed anything his forces had ever experienced. On June 18, 1944, just 3 days after the initial invasion began, the Espiritu airfield fell to U.S. troops. Within 4 days, construction battalions Seabees of the 3rd Battalion, 20th Marines, along with the 121st and 18th Construction Battalions, had transformed the field to accommodate P-47 fighters. By July, while combat was still raging in Saipan's northern mountains, work began on expanding the airfield to handle B-29 Super Fortress bombers. The first B-29, Jolton Josie from the 73rd Bombardment Wing, arrived on October 12, 1944. General Sato did not survive to document his experiences. He took his own life on July 7, 1944, as American forces approached. However, his final orders, translated into English, illustrate his comprehension of the strategic significance of rapid airfield construction. The enemy's relentless assault continues, and it is anticipated that they will launch an all-out offensive. I shall defend our sovereign domain until my last breath and refuse to be captured alive. Sato recognized that Saipan's airfields would bring Tokyo within range of bombers. Yet he could not fully comprehend the magnitude of construction efforts that would follow. Transforming Saipan into a significant B-29 base required moving millions of tons of coral and earth. Seabees units operated their Caterpillar D-7 and D-8 bulldozers for 20 hours daily, with only 4 hours set aside for maintenance. The powerful D-8 bulldozer, equipped with hydraulic controls and boasting 148 horsepower, could achieve what would have taken hundreds of manual laborers to complete. The Japanese forces did not possess machinery on par with this level of capability. After the capture of the 17th Sato Construction Unit in the Solomon Islands, interrogations revealed their modest inventory: 5 trucks, 1 steam roller, and hand tools. Japanese military leaders on Saipan believed that fortifying their positions would take several months. In contrast, American Seabees units managed to establish numerous operational airfields within weeks. Even more startling was the Americans' ability to construct these facilities under enemy fire. Japanese military strategy traditionally valued the warrior spirit of Yamato Damashi over material resources. However, on Saipan, they encountered combat engineers who were equally adept at fighting and building. The 121st Construction Battalion, initially part of the Marine Corps, demonstrated this dual capability by engaging in infantry battles while also operating construction equipment. This unique blend of combat effectiveness and technical skill was unprecedented within Japanese military experience. If Saipan astonished Japanese commanders, the events on nearby Tinian left them bewildered. The construction effort there stands as one of the most extensive and rapid military engineering accomplishments in history. From July 1944 to May 1945, the 6th Naval Construction Brigade, comprising around 15,000 Seabees, transformed Tinian into a massive bomber base complex. Records from Naval Construction Battalion archives highlight this achievement as nothing short of extraordinary. The brigade built 6 68 0-foot runways capable of launching B-29 bombers on their 3,000-mile round-trip missions to Japan. Additionally, they hauled and packed down enough coral to fill Hoover Dam 3 times over. Colonel Kiyoshi Agata commanded approximately 9,000 Japanese troops on Tinian. Despite most of these forces perishing in the island's defense, American construction progress was evident even during the fighting. Seabees units arrived with the initial assault waves on July 24, 1944, and by August 1, they were already repairing and extending the former Japanese fighter strip at Northfield, despite the southern part of the island still being under enemy control. The Japanese had constructed their original Tinian airfields over a longer period, using forced labor from Chamorros and Koreans. A captured engineering report from Tinian, translated by ATIS, detailed their construction methods. The construction involved manual crushing of coral and hand mixing of concrete, with picks and shovels as the main tools. According to one report, extending a runway by 1,000 feet would necessitate the labor of 1,000 workers over 2 months. In contrast, American Seabee units managed to expand Tinian's runways by 4,000 feet in under 30 days. This rapid construction capability likely had a significant psychological impact on surviving Japanese personnel, as evidenced by interrogations conducted by the Office of Naval Intelligence. Although these interrogations primarily focused on military intelligence rather than construction observations, several prisoners expressed amazement at American equipment. A captured naval construction unit member stated that their methods could not match those of the US Navy, which used bulldozers and power shovels compared to manual shoveling and scooping. Lieutenant General Tadamichi Kurabayashi, who commanded the Japanese garrison on Iwo Jima, was well positioned to appreciate American industrial capabilities. He had served as a military attaché in Washington, D.C. from 1928 to 1930 and traveled extensively throughout the United States. His letters home, later published under the title Picture Letters from the Commander-in-Chief, offer some of the few surviving Japanese perspectives on American strengths. On February 19, 1945, when American Marines landed at Iwo Jima, Kurabayashi led about 21,000 defenders. He had spent months fortifying the island, creating an extensive network of underground tunnels and command posts. Japanese construction troops had dug nearly 11 miles of tunnels, setting up concealed artillery positions in the process. This project was one of the most substantial Japanese undertakings during the war, completed over many months. The American approach to construction differed greatly. It emphasized speed rather than concealment and relied on mechanical power instead of manual labor. Naval Construction Battalions 31st and 133rd landed with the initial assault waves. Battalion 133rd NCB, attached to the 4th Marine Division, suffered heavy casualties, 40 killed, 156 wounded, and 48 evacuated for illness from a force of approximately 1,100 men. Despite these losses and continuous combat, construction work proceeded at an unprecedented pace. Within days after landing, damaged Japanese airfields were being repaired. By February 26, just 1 week into the invasion, an O-1 artillery spotter became the first American aircraft to land on a repaired runway. Less than 2 weeks later, on March 4, a B-29 made an emergency landing while fighting still continued. The 9th Bombardment Group's dynamite aircraft were damaged over Tokyo and couldn't return to the Marianas. A swiftly repaired Jima airfield provided refuge for both the plane and its crew. Kurabayashi, who perished on March 26, 1945 during the final Japanese assault, didn't live to document his thoughts on American engineering prowess. However, a pre-invasion evaluation he made is preserved in Japanese military records and later translated, acknowledging the enemy's superior equipment and offensive capabilities. He could not have foreseen the rapid construction under intense fire. A single documented event highlights this disparity. Japanese forces spent 2 years trying to build a road up Mount Suribachi, yet within just 2 weeks of capturing it, American bulldozers had created a thoroughfare to the summit. This feat, as recounted by Marine Corps historians, reportedly moved a captured Japanese officer to tears, although the specific individual remains unverified in existing records. By March 26, over 24 B-29s had made emergency landings at Iwo Jima, saving around 27,000 airmen. These airfields were constructed and maintained under constant enemy fire, a scenario Japanese military doctrine never anticipated as feasible. The Battle of Okinawa, which began on April 1, 1945, offered the final major opportunity for Japan to observe American construction capabilities firsthand. Colonel Hiromichi Yahara, senior operations officer of the Japanese 32nd Army and an exchange officer in the United States from 1933 to 1935, where he studied at Fort MacArthur and toured numerous military installations, was uniquely positioned to witness these operations. Unlike most senior Japanese officers, Yahara survived the battle and later wrote memoirs documenting the Okinawa campaign, offering one of the few detailed Japanese perspectives on American tactics. Despite his pre-war understanding of American capabilities gleaned from his time in the United States, even Yahara was impressed by what he saw at Okinawa. The sheer scale of American construction efforts there remains remarkable to this day. On April 1, 1945, shortly after arriving on Okinawa, American troops seized both Kadena and Yontan airfields, which the Japanese had inexplicably neglected to defend properly. By April 3, crews from the 58th Battalion and the 19-1 Aviation Engineer Battalion were busy repairing and expanding these two captured fields. Just 1 week later, American fighter planes were already operating out of these air bases, offering essential support to ground troops. The magnitude of subsequent construction efforts was unparalleled. Ultimately, nearly 95,000 Army and Navy personnel would be involved in building up Okinawa's infrastructure. Initial plans envisaged facilities capable of handling as many as 4,000 aircraft. Several naval construction brigades, the 8th, 10th, 70th, and 11th, were tasked with constructing not only airfields but also entire port complexes, ammunition storage areas, hospitals, and supply hubs, effectively building a major military complex in the midst of ongoing combat. Yahara's memoir reflects his growing recognition of American construction prowess. Although he concentrates more on tactical and strategic aspects than on specific engineering details, he observes that American forces could establish operational bases at a faster rate compared to how quickly Japanese units could launch counterattacks. His account of the April 19th Japanese offensive underscores the futility of attacking well-protected and continuously reinforced American positions. What Yahara experienced, but might have been unable to fully convey, was a fundamental disparity in military philosophies. Japanese doctrine emphasized the spiritual component, suggesting that a warrior's resolve could compensate for material deficiencies. In contrast, U.S. military strategy stressed the integration of combat strength with industrial capacity. Combat engineers known as Seabees were proficient both at handling firearms and operating heavy machinery like bulldozers. Their organizational structure allowed civilian construction expertise to be directly applied to military operations. The Japanese lacked an equivalent force. While they had military engineers equipped with limited resources or conscripted laborers who had no combat training whatsoever, the Americans possessed a cohesive team of skilled builders capable of both fighting and constructing formidable defenses. Interrogations following the capture of the 17th Setsusai Tai in the Solomon Islands revealed that these Japanese units were ill-equipped and untrained for combat. They functioned primarily as labor forces. This stark contrast highlights the extent to which Japanese intelligence underestimated American construction capabilities, a realization fully apparent only after the war concluded. From 1945 to 1946, the Strategic Bombing Survey involved extensive interviews with Japanese military and civilian officials. These interrogations, along with documents translated by ATIS, exposed significant misunderstandings by Japanese planners regarding American industrial capabilities and construction efficiency. Vice Admiral Shidru Fukudome, who served as Chief of Staff for the Combined Fleet and later commanded the 2nd Air Fleet, revealed in post-war interviews that Japanese naval strategists had not anticipated the rapid pace at which Americans could establish bases on captured islands. Pre-war Japanese doctrine suggested that seizing an island would provide a defensive stronghold from which reinforcements would arrive within months. However, the ability of American forces to convert these islands into operational bases within days or weeks rendered this strategy obsolete. The data clearly illustrate the extent of this intelligence failure. Japanese estimates for building a 6,000-foot runway suitable for heavy bombers ranged between 3,000 and 5,000 laborers over 3 to 6 months. In contrast, American Construction Battalions, Seabees, accomplished this task with just 1,100 workers in 20 days, showcasing a 5 to 6-fold improvement in efficiency. Additionally, the simultaneous deployment of multiple Seabees further accelerated construction progress at unprecedented speeds unimagined by Japanese planners. The disparity was equally striking when it came to equipment. A single-date bulldozer could move more earth in an hour than 300 manual laborers could manage in a day. By 1944, American forces had hundreds of these machines available, while the Japanese possessed so few that captured U.S. equipment was considered highly valuable. This construction capability gap highlighted broader differences in industrial and organizational capacity. Japanese military engineering practices remained rooted in traditional methods adapted from civilian construction techniques. Manual labor using tools like picks, shovels, and human-powered transport reflected both a lack of machinery and cultural values emphasizing spiritual strength and physical endurance. Conversely, American construction efforts epitomized the full-scale industrialization of military engineering. Seabees were recruited from experienced professionals in the construction industry, bringing with them years of civilian expertise. They introduced industrial techniques directly into military operations, implementing time and motion studies, maintenance schedules, and standardized procedures that were commonplace in civilian construction in the United States. Prefabrication and standardization, hallmarks of American building practices, were unfamiliar to Japanese methods. Mastery over matting, quant huts, and standardized fuel tanks allowed these items to be mass-produced in American factories and shipped as complete systems. In contrast, Japanese construction depended on locally sourced materials and individually tailored designs for each project. This disparity enabled U.S. forces to construct facilities more quickly and consistently across various locations. The psychological effect of witnessing American construction capabilities on the Japanese military can be gleaned from the available sources. Prisoner interrogations captured letters, though most were censored, along with post-war testimonies provide insight into this phenomenon. Although detailed personal accounts offering intimate perspectives are scarce, a broad pattern emerges, a progression from confidence to confusion and ultimately despair. Initial confidence was well documented. Japanese military doctrine, centered on Yamato Damashi or the spirit of Japan, held that spiritual strength could overcome material disadvantages. The successes at Pearl Harbor and early Pacific conquests appeared to confirm this belief. Japanese forces had bested Western powers across the Pacific with inferior equipment but superior fighting spirit. However, encounters with American construction capabilities at Guadalcanal began eroding this confidence. The rapid completion of Henderson Field and its resilience against bombardment demonstrated something more than mere material superiority. It revealed organizational and industrial prowess that Japanese forces could not match despite their fighting spirit. By 1943, prisoner interrogations showed a growing recognition among Japanese forces of American technological supremacy. Captured members of construction units expressed amazement at the advanced equipment they encountered. The strategic implications of this construction advantage became increasingly clear to Japanese field commanders. Every captured airfield was operational within days. Each island transformed into a staging area for assaulting subsequent targets. The meticulously designed defensive line, intended to wear down U.S. forces through prolonged sieges, was being methodically circumvented by swift base construction that facilitated the leapfrogging strategy. By 1944, this dynamic had permeated high-level military circles. The capture of Saipan, bringing Japan within range of B-29 bombers, precipitated the collapse of the Tojo regime. Military strategists recognized that American operational capacity turned each lost island into a launching pad for further attacks on Japanese territory. Construction of extensive B-29 bases on Tinian and Saipan proceeded at a pace surpassing Japan's ability to respond with effective countermeasures. The ultimate phase, characterized by despair, is evident in the late-war defensive tactics. Decisions not to defend beaches at Iwo Jima and Okinawa, but rather to engage from fortified inland positions, reflected an acknowledgement that American forces would establish beachheads regardless of initial opposition. The focus shifted from preventing landings to inflicting as many casualties as possible, aiming to make further advances so costly that negotiations for peace might ensue. The strategic ramifications of American construction capabilities, especially the Seabees construction battalions, fundamentally altered the course of the Pacific War. This was more than just a matter of constructing bases faster. It represented a revolutionary shift in military strategy driven by advancements in construction technology and organization. The island-hopping approach, which involved bypassing Japanese strongholds to seize less fortified islands for base development, would not have been possible without rapid construction capabilities. Admiral Chester Nimitz's decision to circumvent Rabaul, the primary Japanese base in the Southwest Pacific, was predicated on his ability to quickly build airfields around it that could neutralize its strategic importance through aerial bombardment. The pace of advancement was unprecedented. Pre-war Japanese planning had anticipated that any American offensive across the Pacific would take years, with extended pauses to construct supporting infrastructure. Instead, U.S. forces moved from Guadalcanal to Okinawa, a distance exceeding 3,000 miles, in less than 3 years, turning each captured island into a base for further advances. Meanwhile, the disparity between what Japanese military personnel experienced and what civilians were informed about at home created one of the war's most significant information voids. Japanese censorship, extensive even by wartime standards, systematically suppressed details regarding American construction and industrial prowess. Soldiers' letters home were rigorously censored, with references to American equipment, rapid construction rates, or material superiority frequently deleted. A handful of uncensored letters that never made it to Japan paint a picture of soldiers being astounded by American capabilities. However, this viewpoint never reached the Japanese public. Propaganda from the time depicted Americans as spiritually weak and overly dependent on material luxuries, incapable of matching the indomitable spirit of their Japanese counterparts. Radio Tokyo's broadcasts, closely monitored and translated by American intelligence, consistently promoted Japan's spiritual superiority over America's material wealth. The truth that American forces were not only more resourceful, but also resilient under harsh conditions remained concealed from the Japanese populace. Factual military reports were skewed to reflect a favorable narrative for domestic consumption. For instance, the fall of Saipan was portrayed as a valiant stand against superior numbers, without disclosing that American forces had concurrently established operational B-29 bases amidst ongoing combat. Similarly, the swift advance through the Philippines by U.S. troops was attributed solely to numerical superiority, rather than their unprecedented ability to rapidly set up support infrastructure. This discrepancy in information profoundly influenced Japanese morale and strategic outlooks. Civilians remained relatively optimistic until late 1944, when B-29 raids began to intensify, leaving them puzzled about how American bombers could suddenly reach Japan despite the supposed strength of their defensive perimeter. They were unaware that U.S. construction battalions had swiftly built expansive airfield complexes on captured islands within months. The comprehensive record of American construction efforts in the Pacific offers critical insight into the reasons behind Japan's ultimate defeat. By the end of the war, these units and Army engineers had transformed vast stretches of the Pacific into a web of U.S. military bases that rendered Japan's strategic position untenable. During World War II, total Seabees strength reached 325,000 personnel, with 80% stationed in the Pacific theater. These workers constructed 111 major airstrips and 441 pier facilities. They built ammunition magazines for 2558 installations, covering an area of 700 square blocks, and housing for over 1 million men. Fuel storage capacity was expanded to accommodate up to 100 million gallons, and they erected more than 300 bases across as many islands. The scale of equipment deployed was equally impressive. During the war, over 50,000 bulldozers were manufactured, with thousands dispatched to support operations in the Pacific. The D7 Caterpillar tractor, a vital piece of equipment for Pacific construction projects, weighed 15,000 pounds and had a drawbar pull capacity of 25,000 pounds. The Japanese military lacked any comparable machinery. The introduction of mast and matting, along with pierced steel planking, PSP, revolutionized the process of constructing airfields. Each PSB panel measured 10 feet in length by 15 inches in width, weighed 66 pounds, and featured 87 drainage holes. By 1943, American manufacturers had produced sufficient quantities of mast and matting to construct 240 runways measuring 150 by 5,000 feet each. The total production amounted to 2 million tons, equivalent to the steel required for 600 Liberty ships. This prefabricated runway material enabled a cleared area to be converted into an operational airfield within hours rather than days. The efficiency of human labor was particularly noteworthy. At Henderson Field, the Construction Battalion, Seabees, maintained and repaired the runway despite enduring 140 Japanese air raids and 2 significant naval bombardments. During the October 13-14 battleship bombardment, they filled 53 craters in the runway and had it operational by dawn. This rapid repair rate, which surpassed the damage inflicted, was unprecedented for the Japanese military. Construction timelines were frequently broken. In July 1942, the Espiritu Santo airstrip was completed within just 20 days, setting an early record. By 1943, the 47th Naval Construction Battalion finished a 33 0-foot runway on Guadalcanal Island in only 9 days. The Tarawa airfield rehabilitation that took place over 15 hours in November 1943 demonstrated how captured Japanese facilities could be made operational almost immediately. The scale of American construction capability was exemplified by Tinian's development. Within a year, 15,000 Seabees constructed the world's largest airbase complex on the island. Northfield boasted parallel 85 0-foot runways capable of launching 100 B-29 bombers daily. This single base, built in mere months, could deliver more explosive power to Japan than the entire Japanese military could deploy for defense. The transformation of Okinawa was equally remarkable. Facilities were being constructed to accommodate 4,000 aircraft, surpassing Japan's remaining Air Force capacity. Additionally, port facilities for the invasion fleet, ammunition dumps for a planned assault on Japan, hospitals to treat anticipated casualties, and supply depots for millions of troops were all under development when Japan surrendered. The approximately 95,000 construction personnel stationed in Okinawa were building infrastructure intended for the final attack on Japan. While many high-ranking Japanese officers who witnessed American construction efforts did not survive the war, multiple forms of evidence paint a vivid picture of how Japanese forces perceived these capabilities. Detailed American construction records outline precise timelines and statistics. Japanese strategic decisions also underscored an increasing recognition of the significance of construction prowess. The few surviving testimonies from Japanese officials provide insights into their professional astonishment and strategic concerns. Colonel Hiramichi Yohara, who survived to write a memoir, is perhaps the most crucial witness. His account of Okinawa highlights American construction progress with mechanical precision, noting that engineers often worked more than half a mile ahead of frontline combat zones. He observed civil affairs, Seabees, surveying teams operating in contested areas for days before infantry advances, marking future construction sites amidst ongoing battles. Yohara's post-war strategic analysis acknowledged the insurmountable advantage American engineering and construction capabilities gave to their military operations. Any position Japan abandoned quickly turned into a fortified base from which the enemy could advance further. This realization arrived too late to influence Japanese strategy, but clearly demonstrates that some senior officers grasped its implications. Captain Rikihei Inaguchi, who served as a senior staff officer under Admiral Onishi, the creator of the kamikaze program, also survived and offered insights into naval perspectives on American capabilities. Although his focus was mainly on air operations, he remarked on how swiftly the Americans established new air bases, rendering conventional naval tactics obsolete. Each captured island immediately extended the reach of American air power westward, forcing Japanese defenses to retract faster than they could adapt. Perhaps the most revealing testimonies come from Japanese engineers involved in constructing fortifications. Interrogations of surviving members of construction units after the war revealed their professional amazement at witnessing American methods. One unnamed engineer from the 17th Setsuze Tai noted that observing American construction felt like glimpsing the future, as machines could accomplish tasks within hours that his unit would take weeks to complete manually. Beyond individual accounts, strategic decisions made by Japanese leaders also reflect their understanding of American construction capabilities, further solidifying this perspective. The choice to abandon the defense of beaches at Iwo Jima and Okinawa in favor of fighting from fortified positions stemmed from an acknowledgement that American troops would establish beachheads and support facilities regardless of initial opposition. This shift from holding territory to inflicting casualties was indicative of an understanding that U.S. construction capabilities rendered traditional defensive strategies ineffective. The kamikaze program, in part, emerged as a reaction to these American construction abilities. Conventional naval aviation required extensive bases, maintenance infrastructure, and skilled ground crews, all of which were systematically destroyed or supplanted by the advance of American base-building efforts. In contrast, kamikaze missions needed only one-way fuel and minimal upkeep, allowing them to operate despite the loss of conventional air bases. After the war, captured intelligence revealed Japanese plans to sabotage construction equipment and assassinate operators through special infiltration units, and even considered using chemical weapons to contaminate sites. However, these countermeasures were never effectively implemented due to both Japanese constraints and robust American security measures. By 1945, Japan's final homeland defense strategies fully recognized the inevitability of massive U.S. base complexes being established regardless of resistance. The approach shifted from preventing construction to forcing American forces to build bases amidst heavy casualties, with the hope that high losses would compel negotiations rather than unconditional surrender. By late 1944, senior Japanese military leaders had begun to comprehend the strategic implications of American construction capabilities, though this realization came too late to change the course of the war. The fall of Tojo's government following the loss of Saipan underscored political recognition that U.S. B-29 bases would soon threaten Japan with sustained strategic bombardment. The Japanese military's response clearly demonstrated their understanding of the construction threat. The fierce defense of Iwo Jima, where Japanese forces inflicted some of the highest casualties on American troops in any Pacific battle, was driven by the knowledge that its airfields would serve as fighter escorts for B-29s attacking Japan. Lieutenant General Kuribayashi's decision to abandon traditional Banzai charges for a deliberate defensive campaign reflected an understanding that the airfields would be built regardless of resistance, the only variable being the cost in American lives. Similarly, at Okinawa, the Japanese strategy to hold out as long as possible while kamikaze attacks targeted U.S. naval forces acknowledged that the island was destined to become a major American base. Colonel Yohara's strategy acknowledged that American troops would set up airfields and ports. Instead of preventing their establishment, the aim was to make these endeavors as expensive as possible for the Americans. This progression, from initial surprise through recognition to strategic adjustment, demonstrates that Japanese forces comprehended and reacted to American construction capabilities, even if detailed records do not exist today. Strategic choices themselves serve as evidence of understanding, revealing insights that written documents might lack. The narrative of how the Japanese interacted with American base-building prowess is more about statistical data and strategic outcomes than personal anecdotes or emotional narratives. Due to the destruction of military archives and the scarcity of individual accounts, we miss out on the detailed perspectives of how Japanese soldiers and officers experienced the shock of American construction superiority. Nonetheless, surviving evidence, such as construction statistics, strategic decisions, limited testimonies, and post-war analyses, paints a vivid picture of gradual recognition and significant consequences. The rapid deployment of airstrips like Espiritu Santo in 20 days, the swift rehabilitation of Tarawa's airfield within 15 hours, and the extensive B-29 bases on Tinian while battles continued nearby, exemplified more than mere engineering prowess. These feats represented an industrial and organizational edge that made Japanese defeat inevitable once American forces secured a foothold in the Pacific. For military professionals who grasped the implications, witnessing American construction capabilities must have been profoundly disheartening. They faced not just American military might, but also the projection of American industrial civilization across the ocean through heavy machinery and prefabricated materials. Each meticulously built Japanese defensive position took months to construct by hand, while American engineers could match or exceed it in days or weeks. This rapid base construction enabled the island-hopping strategy that bypassed fortified Japanese positions, condensing the timeline of American advancement from years to months. It also brought Japan within range of strategic bombing earlier than anticipated. Fundamentally, this showed that the Pacific War was not just a battle between military forces, but an industrial contest, one in which Japan could not keep pace. The few surviving Japanese testimonies consistently express astonishment at American equipment and construction speed. Strategic choices demonstrate an increasing recognition of construction's significance. The hasty defenses erected at Iwo Jima and Okinawa during the final stages of the war acknowledged that American bases would be established despite any resistance. The kamikaze program was an asymmetric response to material superiority that could not be matched through conventional means. Instead of highlighting impossible feats of American construction, the story concludes with a strategic acknowledgement of industrial reality. Emperor Hirohito's surrender broadcast on August 15, 1945, mentioned a new and extremely destructive weapon, but also admitted that the war situation had not necessarily favored Japan. This tacit recognition encompassed various factors, including the realization that American forces could project their industrial might across the Pacific at unprecedented speeds and scales, making further resistance futile. The motto of the construction battalions, Seabees, Construimus Batomus, or We Build, We Fight, signified a new era in warfare. Combat engineers capable of building under fire at industrial rates represented something that Japanese military traditions had not anticipated. For those who witnessed this capability, it must have felt like confronting the future itself, where spiritual strength alone could not counter bulldozers, prefabricated materials, and systematic organization. The 6,000-foot airstrips built in just 20 days were more than mere engineering achievements. They symbolized a new form of warfare that Japanese forces were unprepared to face. The story is less about what was said than what was done. Strategic adjustments, defensive measures, and the ultimate acceptance of defeat speak louder than any destroyed documents or undocumented testimonies. These actions reveal how Japanese military leaders gradually understood they were not merely fighting an enemy, but an industrial system, one that traditional military virtues alone could not overcome. The legacy of this encounter extends beyond World War II. The rapid establishment of bases to project logistical support across vast distances, as demonstrated by the Seabees in the Pacific, became a permanent feature of modern warfare. These capabilities, first witnessed with astonishment by Japanese forces, remain integral to contemporary military strategy. For historians, the limited documentation of Japanese perspectives on American construction prowess is both frustrating and enlightening. It is frustrating because it lacks personal accounts that would add emotional depth to this story. But it also serves as a reminder that history often shapes itself through capabilities and systems that contemporaries may not fully comprehend or document. The Japanese forces who saw Seabees construct airstrips at seemingly impossible speeds were witnessing a revolution in military affairs. Yet they might have lacked the conceptual tools to articulate its full significance. The numbers tell their own story over the decades. 111 major airstrips, 441 pier facilities, and bases for 1.5 million men. These accomplishments significantly altered the trajectory of the Pacific War. For Japanese observers who witnessed these facilities emerging from dense jungle terrain and swamps, seeing airfields operational within days rather than months, the rapid expansion of American infrastructure across the Pacific was a staggering sight. These figures were more than mere data points. They symbolized an entirely new era in warfare, one that moved at a pace unimaginable to Japanese military traditions. The metamorphosis of the Pacific through the sheer efficiency of American construction efforts remains one of the war's most significant, yet often overlooked elements. Despite the bravery and tactical prowess displayed by Japanese forces, which frequently outmatched their American counterparts, they could not replicate the industrial capacity that swiftly converted captured islands into formidable offensive bases. This overwhelming industrial and organizational advantage embodied in the achievements of the construction battalions, CBS, proved as crucial as any military engagement in shaping the outcome of the Pacific War.